And definitely everyone's looking for that break below the 1,000 level. That's for the Naira this time. But we'll keep tracking to see what measures CBN has to take to bring that level to us. Let's get a sense of prospects now for green hydrogen in Africa and happenings also in the global oil market. Joining us for this is Chinandak Dikwa. He's the Vice Chair, African Energy Council. Joining me from Mauritania. Great to have you on the show.
Hi, Ladi. Pleasure to see you again.
Fantastic. So we're seeing oil prices down about 1% today from 3% last week. Is that geopolitical risk premium for oil? It seems it's stepped down fully by investors at this time.
Absolutely, Ladi, and I think thankfully so. Many of us are heaving a massive sigh of relief, not just for oil markets, but I think for global geopolitics, as you can imagine. So last week, you had me on, I think last week, and we spoke about this, the fact that there was a huge amount of risk premium that was being baked into oil and gas because of the escalating situation in the Middle East. So would have seen that, first of all, Israel, the attack in Syria on the Iranian embassy, and then we had the reprisal, Iran sort of, for the very first time, directly attacking Israel. I think that's the key thing there. And then Israel directly attacking, Iran. So we've seen both of these very direct attacks. And when you had me on the show, the sentiment was that we'll see a massive escalation, even the oil price of about 130, which is what many analysts have been saying. Thankfully, that has not happened, because as you would see, both sides are showing a lot of restraint. So even though airstrikes have been done directly, I think they've largely been more symbolic as opposed to anything that's really serious. So they're showing a lot of restraint, which is great.
And how much is the strengthening U.S. dollar playing into oil prices at this time? My last guess said the DXY could hit about 114 in coming days.
Absolutely, Laddie. So that's a very interesting one. So I'd say this. First of all, last week, like you said, a 3% drop between last week, sort of 3% drop in total. This week, we're seeing a further 1% drop. And two things are happening. One, it's a risk-off environment, for the Middle East conflict. Right now, the whole market is just looking at market fundamentals. So now that risk is off, the market is being driven mainly by fundamentals of demand and supply. So, like you mentioned there, one is demand and supply, but also, the FX, the US dollar, that continues to consolidate and get stronger. And because of that, of course, when the dollar gets strong, then ultimately, the oil price will weaken because it's denominated based on that. So a part of it is that, without a doubt, that the dollar's getting stronger and ultimately is pushing down, sort of the price of oil, without a doubt. But another thing, Laddie, to think about is US stockpiles has grown in the last week. The last week, we've seen that stockpiles for the US are growing very significantly. So that, again, is weighing. So I'm preempting your next question. What we expect for the end of this week, perhaps, is that even we'll see a slight decrease again going forward, because one, stockpiles are growing, but number two, the interest rates remain very high. We think these two, particularly from a market fundamental standpoint, could depress the price of oil slightly in the short term. And I'll caveat that, in the short term.
Right. And do you think volatility in the Middle East will keep oil markets still jittery in the short term?
I think if you look at general sentiment, it seems like a risk-off environment right now. The restraint has been shown by the two sides, giving the market a lot of confidence. Yes, we had a direct strike. So before now, Laddie, we're talking about attacks through the Houthis and, sort of attacks through proxies, from Israel and Iran, okay? So it was a proxy war. For the first time, we saw a direct conflict between these two. But I'm going to say this, that if you look at Iran's sort of attack, it was very much sort of, we're going to hit you, or X, Y, and Z, and it did happen. Israel were very clear about that. They knew it was coming. And again, if you look at Israel, they were showing a lot of restraint. What the market was pricing in, Laddie, I'll say this. What the market was pricing in was the risk of Israel hitting one of the nuclear facilities in Iran. If that had happened, then without a doubt, we would have seen oil at about $130 a barrel. It's a minimum. Why? Iran is the third OPEC producer. of oil. So if that happens, you can imagine the amount of disruption and supply glut that would happen there. So that's not happened. Israel showed a lot of restraint. Iran showed a lot of restraint, and great stuff for both of them, for doing that. And I think that's why that did not escalate to a level that we thought it would.
Right. All right, let's look at the renewable energy space now. The first Mauritanian-German green hydrogen forum, that kicks off tomorrow in Mauritania. And I know you're there, you're in town for that. What are you expecting?
Yeah, it's really exciting. I've got to say, it's my first time here in Nouakchott. And it's been a really, really exciting atmosphere to see a country, by all standards, one of the lowest in the world in terms of human development index and GDP growth and all of the statistics that you can throw out. It's great to see them really starting to come out of the parapet and start to lead in green hydrogen development, not just green, but also, sort of thinking about blue. But the point here is this, and I think this was really exciting. They are positioned, as you would know it, much closer to Europe, just at the base of Europe, so at the top of them is Morocco and then straight into Europe there. And because of that, they're trying to use that advantage, proximity to market, to land hydrogen into Europe. We're helping them to shape that, sort of thesis and business plan and, the technical side of things to make sure that happens. But it's very exciting to see, I've got to say. And I think many African countries need to start to look at that as well. I know several are, and maybe, several other ones. But Nigeria needs to do that as a matter of urgency, without a doubt.
What would you say are the prospects for green hydrogen, also solving Africa's energy issues, at this time, even though we see it has some export potential?
Yeah, so I think the way to answer that question, Laddie, is the world is so interconnected these days from a market standpoint. The reason why I'm saying that is nothing new, but the reason why I'm saying that is because, Laddie, we're seeing for the very first time that carbon taxation is being priced into goods and services. Okay, many people may not know this, but right now, from the third quarter of 2023, last year, up until 2026, Europe have come up with a taxation system. It hasn't kicked in yet. The taxation, particularly between the dates I said, 2023 and 2026, this is just a follow period. The taxation kicks in from 2026. Now, if your goods are going to hit Europe, if you're not decarbonizing it, then all of a sudden, you'll be under pressure because they'll put a tax that's commensurate to how much emissions you're putting out. So to your question, how would that become important for decarbonization goods in Africa? Very, very important. Hydrogen, is a fuel that you can use for a variety of applications. On a very standard standpoint, it doesn't have huge amount of emissions like you have for oil and gas and other ones. So it's something that you can use in your production and ultimately means your emissions are a lot smaller than usual. So from an African standpoint, if you take Dangote, for the sake of argument, using him as an example, if we take, some of the products he's got, fertilizer and all of that, they're using hydrogen to produce that. You would land at the port of Rotterdam or land at the port of Hamburg, and the amount of tax you'd pay would be really small compared to someone else in Asia who is not using that. So there is an economic incentive, if you see what I mean. There's an economic incentive there for you to use that in your production, and ultimately that translates to your bottom line because you're much more profitable as well.
All right, we see the European Investment Bank they estimate that Africa could have a green hydrogen production capacity exceeding 50 million tons per annum by 2035. Talk to me about how Africa can take advantage of this and a country like Nigeria.
Yes, great question. So it's a couple of things. One is, if I just take Mauritania. Mauritania is 5 million people. It's right on the coast of Africa, coast of the Atlantic, as it were. It's very proximate to Europe. You can land in Italy easily, into Spain, easily into Italy, Germany, not far away. Mauritania is 5 million people, and it's, I think, the 11th largest country in the world by landmass. So think about that for a split second. 5 million people, huge amount of landmass. Ultimately, that means from a green hydrogen standpoint, there's a huge amount of area that you can put solar panels and harvest all of that, solar and send it into an electrolyzer to produce green hydrogen. And then you have the coast, which you just put straight onto a ship and then send into the market, which is not far away. So that's one use case. Namibia is the same. Namibia, I think, is about 4 million people with a massive landmass. And similar demographic, you can get that done. And several countries, Senegal, about the same. You go into South Africa, they can do the same. So there's several pockets. You go into the north of Africa, Egypt can do the same. Tunisia can do the same. Morocco, they have the huge Sahara the Sahara Belt, which has a lot of solar irradiation. So to that point, 50 million tons per annum, that's sort of the thesis, that there's a huge amount of places that you can do that. Now, I'm going to come to Nigeria. Nigeria was a bit different. Nigeria's a bit different. The coast of Nigeria, we have a huge amount of oil and gas resources there. We don't have a lot of land, from that standpoint. So green hydrogen is still a question, okay, because you need a lot of scale for you to make that work, for you to hit the $2 per kilo, which is a magic number, the break-even number, $2 per kilo. So Nigeria needs to think differently from that standpoint. Blue hydrogen is our competitive advantage. We're a gas basin. We can take that gas and turn it into hydrogen and again put it onto a ship and send it away. So a bit of unconventional thinking, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. Maybe not green so much for Nigeria to be competitive. Maybe blue is the answer.
All right, definitely we'll keep tracking to see how we can take advantage of that market. Thank you so much, Chinan Dikwo, Vice Chair, African Energy Council. It was great talking to you again.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'll take a break now. When we come back, we head straight to the markets for the first trading day of this week. Just stay with us.